January 14th, 2020, 0.75% and 0.16%. This is the date that Windows 7 hit its end of life, and the percentage of Windows users on Steam that is still running Windows 7 and Windows 8.1 respectively. Now, 8.1 hit its end of life date a little bit more recently, but that wasn't popular when it was current, let alone today. Fun fact, if you combine these numbers together, it's a little bit less than half the entire Linux market share on Steam, which is kinda sad, but the number is certainly growing thanks to things like Proton and, more recently, the Steam Deck. But that's besides the point. It is pretty well established by everybody with any sort of tech background that at this point, you should not be running Windows 7. Now, before anyone says so, I know there are industry edge cases, but there are also people running 40-plus-year-old mainframes, and you're not running a factory, you're trying to play some video games. Now, I do have empathy for people that are running ancient hardware that cannot afford something newer, but at this point you are going to be so much better off with literally any supported Linux distro. If you have a Windows 7 machine, this should be a dedicated gaming box. You shouldn't be doing anything sensitive on this. You shouldn't be browsing the web. It should only be used for gaming. This is not a safe machine to use. But most of you probably agree with that. And finally, Valve is doing so as well. And it looks like Valve feels the same way as well, because on January 1st, 2024, Windows 7 and Windows 8 support is going away. And the reason for doing this is pretty straightforward. This change is required as core features in Steam rely on an embedded version of Google Chrome, which no longer functions on older versions of Windows. This is pretty obvious it's the case, but if you go to basically any page on the Steam client, it's just loading up a web page, and that's because modern Steam isn't really a desktop application in a traditional sense. It's basically a glorified web browser limited to just the Steam service. In addition, future versions of Steam will require Windows features and security updates only present in Windows 10 and above. Not a concern if you're a Linux user. We strongly encourage all Windows 7, 8, and 8.1 users to update sooner rather than later. Microsoft ended security updates and technical support for Windows 7 in January 2020, and Windows 8.1 in January 2023. Computers running these operating systems when connected to the internet are susceptible to new malware and other exploits which will not be patched. That malware can cause your PC, Steam, and games to perform poorly or crash. That malware can also be used to steal the credentials for your Steam account or other services. We love running unpatched security vulnerabilities. Now, it is one thing to just use Windows 7 in 2023. You bought a computer 10 plus years ago, you don't know what an operating system is, you don't know how to upgrade one, it's just the thing that makes the computer do the computer thing. Now it's another thing to actively go out of your way to defend the use of Windows 7 and basically demand that Valve keeps supporting it. I am going to show you a world that many of you may not have realized existed. Now, some users aren't crazy, they're just a little bit concerned. Steam will stop working on Windows 7, 8, 8.1 as of 1st of January 2024. And of course, I am freaking out because I can't afford a new laptop. I have 60 Steam games that I use Steam Link app on a Shield and tablet to play those games on PC. I think I can still play the games locally on the Potato laptop, but without the Steam client, no cloud saves, patches, and game updates, and most importantly, no Steam Link, since it needs Steam client open to work, laptop is too old to upgrade to Windows 10 or 11. Now, a user like this often isn't very technically savvy. They have the device, they know that, they probably should be on something newer, and these users can often be with a bit of discussion and explaining no, your device actually isn't that old, because this laptop is only from 2012. It was a pretty nice device in 2012 as well. This is a device that has no issue at all running Windows 10, and eventually this user actually got Windows 10 installed, and now they have no issues. Steam will stop running on Windows 7 in X days. F that noise. They say they'll deny me the ability to play the games that I paid for with the money unless I upgrade my OS. This seems like a lawsuit. Should be illegal. They could just simply say no further updates to the Steam client. But for me to not be able to launch an EXE that is on my drive? Effing BS. S my effing C. What is this? This is a mess of a sentence. Just swear if you want to swear. This goes back to what I was saying before. The Steam client is basically a web browser, and the Steam interface is basically just a website. And eventually, web browsers and websites stop supporting older operating systems for any number of reasons, whether it's newer features being used, security stuff, or basically anything else. And you're not entitled to a company continuing to support an ancient operating system the company that makes it doesn't support either. Also, fun fact, Steam's subscriber agreement literally says that sometimes they will raise up the system requirements. Steam and your subscription require the download and installation of content and services onto your computer for reasons that include, without limitation, system security, stability, and multiplayer interoperability. Valve may need to automatically update, preload, create new versions of, or otherwise enhance the content and services, and accordingly, the system requirements to use the content and services may change over time. You consent to such automatic updating. Now, it would be nice if you could play all your Steam games without DRM, without the Steam client here. That would be great, and there are services like GOG that offer that. But if you buy games through Steam, you're accepting the fact that you're not actually buying a game. You are buying a license to play the game through the Steam client. And sometimes, you gotta stop using an ancient unsupported operating system. But that is not going to stop people dropping the lawsuit idea. This is not just a one-off person suggesting it. Save Windows 7 or we sue Valve. I have been running Windows 7 like many for 10 plus years and have a massive catalogue of games that listed support for Windows 7 at the time of purchase. If you as a platform choose to brick my Steam install and prevent me from ever playing my games again, you can expect another class action lawsuit demanding entire account-based refunds. But hey, maybe that will be cheaper than maintaining a legacy version of your product you've built a monopoly out of. Anyone who thinks Windows 7 is actually dead, it is actually dead, just head over to WinRaid forums before claiming my argument is invalid. Plenty of people have been doing God's work, maintaining the OS for modern hardware, and plenty of die-hard users. If I need to go to some weird forum that nobody's ever heard of, I think you might be a very, very, very tiny niche. Edit. Valve also still advertises games that put Windows 7 in the specs to run the game. If you want to benefit from the marketing of Windows 7 in 2023, you cannot also discontinue it the same year. That's the same reason why warranties exist, otherwise companies would make their products less durable to die within a year. It's been EOL for the past 3 years, my guy. So I don't care what the TOS says, no one can be realistically expected to read it all anyways, and a court could totally side against Valve on this. Now for the record, if you open up Steam on Windows 7, there is a giant bar at the top of the page saying, hey, this is the exact number of days until this no longer works. I think it is very clear that Windows 7 is no longer going to be supported. Also, just because a game lists support for an older operating system doesn't mean that Valve has to support the older operating system. For example, this is Doom 1993. Now, if we go down to the system requirements, the game works on XP and Vista. But that doesn't mean that the Steam client has to support that, because that's not how this all works. Or here's Half-Life, which says in the requirements as well, hey, even though it supports this old operating system, you need to be on a supported Steam client. But it's not like this only happened twice. Let's keep going. Class action lawsuit coming over forced Windows 10 upgrade. I will not be upgrading to Windows 10, especially when someone is attempting to force me to do so. You can give me and everyone who will not accept this forced upgrade a full refund for all our games, or you can face a class action lawsuit that you will lose. Bad move, Steam. Not a good decision at all. Why does Valve want to steal my games? licenses. At least they realize that you're already buying a license. I have an old laptop. It has Windows 7 on it. On this laptop, Windows 7 works, and I can play Steam, and I'm sure there's a way to restructure that sentence. I play on it, e.g. when traveling, match 3, or hog games. I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. Question: why would Steam stop working on it if it currently works? I went over this before, is basically just a web browser. What a problem to leave the current version of Steam for owners of Windows 7 and older systems, and second, newer and developed one for Windows 10 and up. I have a feeling that English is not this person's first language. I believe the Consumer Ombudsman would be interested in the case, and owners of Windows 7 computers should consider a class action lawsuit against Valve. And this one is my favorite. I'm not going to read all of it because it's a giant wall of text, but this is kind of incredible. Everyone, let's do a strike against Steam. We'll stop running on Windows 7, 8, and 8.1. That's what Valve actually wants you to do. They want you to do a strike against it because they don't want to keep supporting it. This is a scam on Steam's part. I paid for these games on Windows 8.1, which said they work on Windows 8.1. So then Steam 255 days Windows 10 enforcement is totally illegal. Now it's about 19 days. Everyone, gather your receipts, and products sold in USA, if change altered is consider false advertisement. If it said date of purchase of your game, it says it works on Windows 7, 8, and 8.1, then they change the product after purchase or deny you access to your games, then you can sue Steam. Steam cannot force people to Windows 10 after purchase. Steam better refund my money back before said date. You cannot take our money if we refuse to comply. We paid for these games. My computer cannot handle Windows 10, and I don't feel like it. So give us our mother money back, or me and my 10 lawyers will sue the Satan out of you. You can't gaslight us. I've done it. Game dev and application building for over 20 years. I know how this works. Lying to my face. I love this post so much. Valve are scammers, taking away our games. You could have at least some legacy launcher, but you're too lazy to do so or got paid by Microsoft. You don't need to get paid by Microsoft to stop supporting the operating system that they're not supporting anymore. Everybody is dropping it unless they've already done so. And now we're robbed of old games. Not all of us are playing live service junk that gets useless updates every week. GOG is the king. All games you bought there, you can download and install on Windows 7, even Windows XP if games support it. And if you want playtime and achievements, you can install GOG Galaxy 1.2 launcher that works on Windows 7 fine. Even GOG 2.0 is not dropping Windows 7 support. GOG is a great service, and if you want to be able to play your games on these old systems, buy your games there. Nobody is stopping you doing that. But you didn't buy your games there, you bought them on Steam. You bought them knowing there was going to be DRM, and knowing that eventually the Steam client would need to be updated. You made that choice, nobody else. Taking away OS support takes away our games. Don't do it. Now, this is another really long post, but there is one part I want to mention. I guess if you're going ahead with this, I should just refund this Steam Deck. If I can't trust you, I don't want it in my hands. What if I told you the Steam Deck would alleviate all of your problems? Now, obviously some games don't play perfectly fine under Linux, but you're probably not playing one of these live service games that are really a problem. And if you want to have, pretty much perfect game support, just chuck Windows 10 or Windows 11 on it, and boom, now you have a device that has Windows 10 that plays the games, and the problem goes away. But this is not the only person that talks about Linux. If Steam drops Windows 7 and 8 support, they also drop Linux support. Why? Read below. This is someone who doesn't understand anything they're talking about. From Steam itself, this change is required as core features in Steam rely on an embedded version of Google Chrome, which no longer functions on older versions of Windows. In addition, future versions of Steam will require Windows features and security updates only present in Windows 10 and above. They explicitly say that the future Steam will require Windows 10 features and security updates. which Linux can't have. So what will Steam do for that? Knowing that there is more Windows 7 users than Linux users. That's not the case anymore. That's not at all the case anymore. If Steam can fix their Linux users with Proton, then why not a simple fix for Windows 7? Lol. There is a lot to unpack here. Firstly, when they're talking about the security features here, they're talking in the context of Windows. They're saying, in the Windows line, Windows 7 doesn't have these Windows features that are available in the newer version of Windows. Linux isn't even part of this discussion. Secondly, the Steam Deck runs Linux. Valve is not dropping support for Linux. Like, that's not gonna happen. Thirdly, nobody cares to fix games on Windows 7, so no one's gonna do it. And then there is this guy who is going to get his account banned. Windows 7 support ending, refunding my entire library. So let me get this straight. My games that can run fine on Windows 7, I can no longer access past the point. If this is the case, I'll be talking to my bank and refunding my entire games library. I have zero interest in upgrading my hardware or operating system. Does this not violate consumer or antitrust laws? When I started using Steam, I never agreed for them to control what hardware and operating system I can use. You actually did do that. Yes, you actually did do that. Especially considering all the games I play support Windows 7. Now, assuming your bank lets you do this, which after a certain point in time, they're not going to. But assuming you tried to charge back every single purchase you made, Valve is going to assume there is some sort of fraud going on, and your account's gonna get banned. It should be pretty obvious, but every single one of these posts and all of the others out there are completely empty threats. Not a single person is actually going to try and set up a lawsuit. And we know they're not going to because they're sitting on a forum complaining about Windows 7. And gamers are lazy, right? That's why they play games all day. They're going to wait for somebody else to make the lawsuit, who's going to wait for somebody else, who's going to wait for somebody else, and nobody's going to do it. But I hope one of them do, because they're going to lose, and it'll be great content. Now, for anyone keeping score, the exact same thing happened back in 2019, when Windows XP and Windows Vista support were dropped. For the exact same reason, it is happening now. And it seems like people were quite a bit less aggressive then, but there were still people that were running XP up until the very final day. Since then, people have found workarounds with like the Steam CLI client and things like that to actually keep playing the games, and I think there are still people doing it now, but please don't actually go and run XP, like, for the same reason as 7, is not a safe thing to do. There is also this Steam survival guide. This will tell you how to like downgrade things and use the Steam command line tool and all of these other things so you can keep using an old unsupported operating system instead of just upgrading to something just a tiny little bit newer. And honestly, after looking at all of these steps, it kind of feels like less work to just install something different. Now, if any of these Windows 7 people happen to see this, I have one very simple question. What games are you trying to play at this point that aren't going to work fine on a Linux install? Like, install Fedora, Ubuntu, something simple. Like, what games would you want to play? Because you're clearly not playing a modern game that requires anti-cheat, because from what I can see, the only one that still supports 7 is Rocket League. There might be something else, but all of the major ones like Siege, Fortnite, Apex, Warzone, all of those only support 10 or newer. And I wouldn't be surprised if after 2025, it's only going to be 11 and whatever possibly comes after 11. With Proton, pretty much every single game is going to work just fine from this era. If there is something, I want to know what it is. I totally understand not wanting to upgrade to Windows 10 or Windows 11. A lot of people feel like that's a downgrade. But at this point, just give a Linux distro a try and see what it's like. You've probably heard things, and you've probably heard things that are like 10 years out of date. Nowadays, it is a lot simpler, and it's going to be a lot simpler than trying to do these Windows 7 workarounds just to keep using an unsupported operating system that is not safe to use. Try out Ubuntu, try out Fedora, try out Pop! OS, and you might be pleasantly surprised. But that is it for now. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Do you know anyone that is still a die-hard Windows 7 supporter and refuses to use anything else? I would love to know. So let me know your thoughts down below. And if you liked the video, go like the video. And if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe, Pay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and don't run ancient operating systems.
Something like this.